Lost Anne.
We lost Anne.
She can come back.
She'll come back.
Right as we go live. It'll be fine. She'll be back. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Couch Caucus. My name is Amanda Bachman. I've got Bree Oatman here with me, as well as Kristen Hayward. And Kristen is our guest from Planned Parenthood for South Dakota. And I'll let her give a brief introduction while we wait for our second panelist to rejoin the stream.
Perfect. I am the manager of advocacy and development for Planned Parenthood here in South Dakota. I've been with the organization about 2.5 years now. And yeah, it's the greatest work I've ever done. So I'm proud of it. And I know a lot of people are not a fan of what we do, not a fan of me, but I don't care. Yeah, and we have one clinic in Sioux Falls. There's no other Planned Parenthood clinics in the state, and so we're the sole provider of abortion care, and so we're really proud of the work we do. But we do vasectomies and gender-affirming hormone therapy and smears and everything else too. So.
All right. Well, and then I will have Anne share what she does and a little bit of her background. And Anne and I know each other from when I lived in Lead.
Great. I'm Ann Rogers Popejoy. I have had a career in youth advocacy. Right now, I'm the executive director at Northern Hills Alliance for Children in Deadwood, which is an early learning center. But my heart job was when I was a director at the Boys and Girls Club of Lead Deadwood.
Awesome. And today our theme for this week's Couch Caucus is talking about the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on women's health, employment, access to childcare, just, some of how women are being impacted, perhaps disproportionately, by what's currently going on in our state and our nation with COVID-19. So starting with Kristen, I know Planned Parenthood, there have been impacts to the services that can be provided in South Dakota because of COVID-19. So can you speak a little bit to what's been happening in the clinic?
It's been significant. I'm not gonna lie about that. There has been, so we already are under, very difficult constraints at our facility because of local government trying to control what we do and don't do within the walls and confines of our clinic. So we're actually in accordance of the 50 states, we are one of the worst states in the United States to obtain an abortion, which is really frustrating for all of us because it's a woman's right to choose no matter what state you live in. So it's been very frustrating, but because of the stigma and because of the difficulty in the state, we do not have a local provider. So our providers fly in from Minneapolis, St. Paul every week and help these women make this choice for themselves. And so because of that and the flying in and COVID and health issues and contagions and everything like that, we've had to stop abortion care. So we stopped in March, mid-March, about the same time kind of everything shut down. And then we were able to pick up that care again back in October. So it is back. It's back on a minimal basis. It's not to the, where we would like it to be as a clinic and up to the demand of patients in the area. But we are back running and we are doing the best we can for the patients that we do have. We also provide abortion care. Our staff, our Sioux Falls staff, drives to Sioux City each week and provides abortion care in Sioux City. We reopen that clinic down there just temporarily to see if the demand is there and what we need. So it has definitely impacted us. It's a really difficult and stressful thing, but we are proud that it's back and we're doing the very best we can to keep that care available for the women of South Dakota and the southeastern region of the state.
Kristen, how else is it impacted in terms of I think about all the other additional services that Planned Parenthood provides in terms of just general women's health, annual exams, access to birth control, all of those kinds of things too. How have you seen women's access to those things being impacted?
I think it's just kind of how we've all been impacted as a general rule, right? Like, so temperature checks right away when you walk in, masking, separation of patients as they're in the waiting room, making sure that they feel safe in the space. If they've had COVID before, their fears of being reinfected, things like that. But also in the state of South Dakota, a physician, not just a nurse practitioner, is required to be in the facility for vasectomy procedures. So we've had to stop vasectomies as well. That it did come back again in October, but it is hindered by the care that is happening overall, so that it impacts women, even though vasectomy procedure is done on a male. Obviously, it affects the reproductive system of females because of science. So it's definitely changed things, and it makes things different. But I think we're all in the same space, right? Like whether you go to your own clinic, no matter where you go, whether you're going in for a COVID test or you're going in for your smear or you're just going in for general care. I have like some weird wrist injury right now because of tennis, playing tennis with my husband, but I have a fear of going in, really, because I'm sure it's not that big of a deal. It might be a light sprain, but you get nervous because you don't want to overwhelm anybody. I guess mine at this point is a guilt and a feeling of I don't want to bother the doctors that are already worn out and trying to deal with COVID, just for a stupid wrist kind of thing. But at the same time, it's normal care and I would want to receive that just like anybody else. So that's kind of how the clinic sees things, and pap smears and STD testing and gender affirming hormone therapy for transgender patients is all normal things that we do. And we don't want people to be afraid to come to our clinic. We're treating everybody in the safest space we can with COVID, but it's, we're in the upside down. This is hard on all of us.
Yeah. I mean, we were just kind of joking about that before we went live. It's more complicated because I just moved to another town and I need to find a new physician, which, by the way, the whole ad with the 600 doctors who all signed on about wearing masks made my decision-making process a lot easier, because I could kind of be like, all right, who are the OBGYNs in Pierre, and is their name on this list? And if it's not, check, not calling, get an appointment with you. But yeah, I'm due in December. I did just get my mammogram in Spearfish. But, I think, in that case, it's so highly specialized. You would hope that they're not getting called out to do something else. But I also was kind of like, is it really worth going in right now? In terms of risk of, because it's in a bigger clinic, being exposed to other people and all those other kinds of things. It just, but something you brought up in terms of the vasectomies and everything else, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot too, is, hang on a second, my kids are in the background. Hey, I'm doing a live thing right now. Can you play somewhere else? You want to say hi? I can't right now. Do you want to say hi? You want to say hi to Anne? Anne knows Pearl. Hey. Hi.
Oh, hey, Pearl.
And knows Helena too, but she's off somewhere else. No, I was just thinking about, the other thing I've been really concerned about in terms of women, in terms of access to healthcare, is also just in terms of domestic violence, and that they're, what? Okay, take it. Yeah, where's your dad? Go find your dad. I need, the whole impact of just the families being, just everything's kind of turned upside down. And, I think about that, even with all of the privilege that I have, the ability to work from home, I actually am really lucky that I do have childcare now. It's still super stressful in terms of just that the constant, the vigilance of what we're living through. And so I think about that in terms of just relationships with my spouse and my kids, and so I just, and I used to do domestic violence prevention work, and I've just been thinking about that a lot in terms of women and abuse, and then also just thinking about that in terms of that family planning. I make jokes if anyone's having kids right now, it's their firstborn, because they don't know any better. But, at the same time, I'm glib about it, but in reality, I'm worried that some people may not have a choice because they don't have access to that care, or it's, it's the flu data right now, where 4,500 less people of a certain age have gotten flu shots compared to last year. It's well, how do they get access to those flu shots? Do they have to go to a clinic? And is that a high risk activity? So anyway, yeah, that's kind of the other thing I've been thinking about.
Yeah, like it's definitely difficult because we're looking at, people coming into our clinic for literally any reason you could possibly think of, obviously. And our care is so open and so patient that we don't have this judgmental, there's no need for this fast paced kind of thing. The idea is that we would like to be primary care for a lot of women so that they come to us for their birth control. They come to us for questions and consults about things. It's not just about us being this abortion clinic that everyone thinks of it. It is such a small portion of what we do. It's a bigger percentage because we're the state of South Dakota and we only see, we see less patients than the overall of like the United States. But if you're looking at Planned Parenthood as a federation, it's 3% of what we do. So I think when we're talking about caring for women and someone who comes to us, my best example is one of my first days, literally 2.5 years ago. It was my first day in the clinic. So I worked up in Minneapolis for a couple of days first to get trained on just, everything from security to my time card to all that kind of stuff. And then came back to the Sioux Falls clinic and was like, okay, here we go. And I was in there and I decided to put on some scrubs, even though I'm so bad at blood and so bad with smells and all that stuff. I was just beside myself. I'm like, how am I going to handle this part? But I sat in with a young gal who had a 3-year-old at the time, and she came in for abortion care, and she sat through her first appointment because, again, we're doing the 72-hour waiting period, so she has to go through the first process, and she's laughing the entire time, just beside herself, like just laughing hysterically. And we just kind of, we let her be who she was, and we went through the things. She was very embarrassed and very ashamed of her body, did the ultrasound, all that kind of stuff. And then we sat back in the room and we said, well, what do you think? Where are you at with things? How are you feeling? And the tears didn't go this way. They went this way and down. And she just could not catch her breath. She was crying so hard and so beside herself. And she went into this whole story of she was intoxicated. She doesn't remember the night. In the morning, her first word that like popped into her head was rape. These feelings and these horrible things. And again, she's like in her early 20s. This woman should not have had to suffer with these types of things. And again, that's why she was laughing. It's because that was her coping mechanism, is how do I handle this? So I don't have a percentage of like who comes in and how, are we seeing a rise in domestic violence? We always have women in our clinic who have had domestic violence issues in their home, whether that be with their parents and that abuse continues, or it's their current partner or whatever it is. And so, who better to care for these patients than us and be there for them no matter what this is. If they want to keep the child, that's okay too. I mean, we're not in a headspace of trying to convince anybody to do anything. It's just that we're there to try to say, you're okay. You're in a safe space. You can tell us everything. I promise you, we've heard crazier and worse and different. So just be honest with us and we'll be there for you no matter what.
Yeah, and I will say I did support the South Dakota Planned Parenthood with some of the new T-shirts. The South Dakota needs sex education, so I know I've had to branch out my T-shirt selection now, especially since Biden won the election. I need some. I get to retire some of my anti-Trump resist T-shirts, cycle some new ones in. But yeah, and all of this is super important, and things too that I know we have to keep an eye on every legislative session. I've been looking at, seeing how anti-trans stuff is happening in other states and even other countries in the world. I know with the UK right now, it's really bad. And just kind of keeping an eye on what states have, legislative sessions that are going on right now and things that are getting introduced, and just looking at them and being like, oh crap, like we're going to see this on January 12th. So I will say, for anybody out there who's watching this or catches up with us via the recording, definitely follow along with Planned Parenthood South Dakota, and stay involved with reproductive rights and reproductive health care, and just women making decisions about their bodies are important issues to you. Like, we need your advocacy and we need your voice during session. I had a super fun time replying to one of Kristi Noem's tweets. I didn't even say anything. I didn't even say the word abortion. I just said something about women making reproductive health decisions, and her Twitter followers lost their minds on me, which was fantastic. But yeah, there's so much else. There's so much more that Planned Parenthood does than just abortions. It really is the whole spectrum of reproductive health care for everybody. So
yeah, and I think the overarching thing with all four of us on this conversation is, so thank you both for having me and Anne on here. I'll speak for Anne in this exact moment, but this is amazing conversations to have. But I think what's most important, and it's not as sexy and it's not as fun, but local elections are so much more. I think that they are. So yeah, you worry about voting for, obviously we wanted Donald Trump out of office. That is very clear. But beside that, we needed Fred Deutsch out. We need Kristi Noem out eventually. We need John Hanson in District 25 out. Like, we have really bad people in the legislature who do not understand humanity on a normal level. And that goes not for even women's reproductive rights. That goes for everything. These people are insane. So again, we have to, I know it's not sexy, but pay attention. These people are not smarter than you are. I promise. Fix it, and let's get this to be better. Let's be on a 10-year plan and get these assholes out of there. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I swore. Can I swear? I'm swearing.
Kristen, can I ask you a question about, they're talking about the big baby bust that we're going to see after this. And obviously that suggests that a lot of people are planning on not having children during the pandemic. And is that the role that Planned Parenthood plays in that must be critical? And how is that impacted?
I think, when you're looking at the overall rate of just this age group that I am in, for example, like I'm 38, so it would be an older pregnancy for me if I were to get pregnant, but my husband and I have no intention on doing that. And I have an IUD, and I would recommend it to all involved in this conversation. They are the best. But it's not, it's not the right birth control necessarily for everyone, but it just works really well. And it's just a decision we've made. We made it. When we were dating, we said, yeah, maybe we'll have kids. And then we got married, and shortly thereafter, we decided not to. And that comes from a full level. That's not just like, I know I'm really kind of short to temper. I know I'm really anxious. I know that we have mental health issues in my family. I know that, my husband and I are both just like, we want to travel and do all these things. So we just made it from that perspective. But we also see that in my generation, my, very end of the millennial kind of thing. I'm technically a millennial, which doesn't feel right to me, but I am, is that people are just having less and less children, because we're realizing that is not just the goal of life. It's not just go to junior high or middle school, go to high school, go to college, get married, have a kid. There's not a path for everyone that's that perfect way. And I think for me, I'm happy with that. I'm fine with it. There are days. My mom just sent me a video a little while ago, and I will certainly say my old German mother of 65 is not happy that I'm not having children, but she knows it's my life and my decision. And so I think she sent me a cute video of like this 3-year-old like making something. And I get these moments of, gosh, what would that be like? And then I hear chaos, or I hear people wanting to escape their children in this pandemic. And I think, I made the right decision. I'd rather have those moments in my life feeling, and I'm speaking of a lot of my friends at this current state, is climate change. It is the economy. It is what's this world going to be like in 4 years? What's it going to be like in 8? What's it going to be in 15? And also, I'm not a faith-based person. I am not necessarily an atheist, but I don't have anything. And so I'm not one of those people that like, I want my legend to keep going. I know that if I get shot for some reason outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic, I have many friends who have promised me they would write a musical about me. So like, I am okay with this. And I think there's a lot of women in our friend group, especially that share this sentiment. So the statistic is leaning toward less children, more just life stuff. Just do things, adventure yourself, live your best life, and then that's how it goes.
Well, and like, who can afford to have kids in this economy? I mean, that's another really big thing for the millennial and younger generation. You know, we're a generation that has more student loan debt than ever before. You know, the recession of 2008 really, you know, set back a lot of people's, you know, career and family plans. And, you know, we continue to live in a state and a nation that says that it's a Christian nation, says that it's a pro-life nation, but we don't do as much as we should to support families and to make having a family something that is economically viable. I mean, I am also a, you know, single woman with an IUD and 3 cats. So I'm also not adding my genes to the next generation. um, totally fine with me. And you know, some of those reasons are not why I'm you know, not reproducing, but you know, it's a challenge. You know, if as a country we realize that we want to encourage people to have kids again, like we have to have early childhood education in South Dakota. We need to make sure families and children have enough to eat. Like the free like no questions asked lunch program that happened or is happening, is continuing to happen. You know, that's fantastic. I think, you know, students in public school, like everybody should just get free lunch. Like takes away the, you know, worry of having to pack a lunch in the morning or whatever. And then there's no stigma for the kids who are already on the free or reduced price lunch. Like everyone just has the same thing. Like if we're going to give people a public education, we should feed them as well.
Well, and I want to speak to this really fast, and I don't want to keep taking up, like, Anne has her own amazing story, I'm sure, to share, but I think to not have, you know, we're talking about the economy and not being able to feed kids, but if we're not going to send them to late elementary, middle school, junior high-ish with some sex education, because we don't have that regulated at all in the state of South Dakota. Like, just for clarification, everyone on this call has had sex at least once in their lifetime, if not many times in their lifetime. Oh God, scandal, right, Bree? Just but it is a normal part of our lives, and so it's sometimes in those situations we are in, you know, whatever that's it, whether that's a pregnancy or an STD or anything like that, if we're not teaching our young people about, if you do this, this happens. If you do this, this could happen. If you don't protect yourself, this could happen. Like, if we're not going to talk to them about that, and there's no regulation on that in the state of South Dakota, how the hell do we expect these kids to go through high school and not have chlamydia, gonorrhea, a pregnancy, anything like that? And then we shame them on the back end. If we don't teach them, how do they know? Seriously.
Oh, yeah. So this is a good segue for Anne. I mean, I know your focus was going to be on early childhood education, but Anne and I really kind of bonded because she was working at Boys and Girls Club when my now 13-year-old was going there before we moved to Pierre. And we've had conversations about this. And as a former science teacher in South Dakota, also, I mean, you know, like, notice my shirt, which is actually a Biden campaign shirt, but I love this shirt because, like, when I did teach health careers here, but I didn't have the privilege of teaching like specifically health classes or biology. But in the past, when I taught in Saipan, which is a U.S. protectorate, and when I taught in Washington State, the burden of the reproductive health stuff kind of fell on me as the biology teacher or the 8th grade science teacher. And in both cases, that was Washington actually just passed a comprehensive sex education initiative and bill. But even before that, which I'm amazed they did, because even before that, I mean, and I had the benefit of being in our state capital, which was really progressive. And I mean, I literally remember Planned Parenthood coming in and teaching us how to use condoms when I was 15 in a public high school in Washington. Right. And so like, yeah, I mean, so, you know, literally, like, I think my mom knew that I was getting a comprehensive education at school. And so her conversation with me and my brother was, you should really wait until you're in a committed relationship and you're an adult, just because of all the stuff that comes with it. But if you're not going to do that, please use protection. And that was like the end of the conversation. I mean, she probably should have talked about more, but I think she knew we were getting a lot of information at school through our health ed class that it wasn't as big of a concern for her. And perhaps she was uncomfortable talking about it. But I have zero filters about that. And so I remember as a teacher, especially in Washington, I remember going and I remember going to the principal saying, okay, I don't have a filter for this because I feel like the more they know, the better off they're going to be. So what am I not allowed to talk about? And then basically in this community, she said, they need to hear everything. And in Washington, by law, you have to have like an anonymous question box. And so, you know, the kids could ask questions and then you could field those and kind of get into some more detail about things. But yeah, it's, you know, I have a daughter who's an adult now who I remember, like, even with all of that information, she didn't make the best choices her first time out the gate as a senior in high school with that. And, you know, and there were some issues before she went to college. Like there was some like tension at home about like, you know, choices and all of that. And I don't know that she's going to watch this. I hope not. Anyway, I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot, you know, like totally forgot this detail or something like that. Right. Like you just kind of get into these, like you think you've shared all the information you need to share and then oops. So, yeah. So Anne, you want to, and then you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that conversations about sex education and a lack of care for children after they're born in South Dakota are an excellent segue into talking about early childhood education. And, you know, childcare has been put under tremendous stress during COVID. But I think it's also important for us to know that all of these issues were here before COVID. They were just exacerbated by it. I mean, there's an incredible lack of childcare in the Northern Black Hills, which is where I'm based. And I actually had to leave like what was my dream job because as a 36-year-old woman, I had a child and I couldn't get care. So I couldn't go back to work full time. And I joke when people are like, oh, how did you end up at Northern Hills Alliance for Children? I'm like, well, you just have to run a childcare center to get childcare here. So honestly, the only way I got full-time daycare was to run the daycare. I mean, it's like, it's this terrible paradigm, but that was pre-COVID. And what happened during COVID is our center decided to make the safest decisions possible. And that was a really big decision because it meant we were going to be unpopular with our local government. And our local government is heavily swayed by the gaming industry, right? I mean, really in Deadwood, they want people coming to town. They want people spending money and they don't want anything icky like a global pandemic to get in the way of that. And so we closed Northern Hills Alliance for Children from March until June. We took that time to really get it together, do our research. We put a doctor on our board. We worked with Sherry B. Smith, who's a retired CEO, healthcare executive, a big lobbyist with the South Dakota Nurses Association, and committed to following and exceeding CDC guidelines for childcare centers. And by doing that, we had to cut our enrollment in half. And so we immediately out of the gate knew that we were going to take a $15,000 hit a month to stay safe. And what happened is sort of surprisingly is we actually gained a lot of notoriety for doing the right thing. And these private foundations stepped up and helped to fund us. So right now we've been open a lot longer than we thought we were going to be able to. We had about 3 months in the bank that we could swing at losing $15,000 a month, and we've been open longer. But finding childcare that's safe isn't necessarily a priority for people right now. I think that in general, they just want to be able to go to work, and some of the practices that we've put in place are inconvenient for them. And we hear about that a lot. So if there's I think what I say all the time is if we had top-down leadership in this issue, the decisions that we're making on a very small scale would be supported, and we wouldn't have to have as many exclusions. We wouldn't be up against all of these barriers because we're fighting for science and common sense, but we're up against people who are fighting for money. And that just doesn't, you can't win in that equation. And South Dakota doesn't win in early education ever. So throwing a pandemic in the mix really puts our children last, and it puts women last when you put children last. And that's unfortunate. And I don't necessarily know how to make that better. I think, what we've learned is that there are private foundations out there who are on the same page that we are. And I think we need to cultivate those donors in this sphere in general because they're there and they're ready to commit to women and children. But as far as getting support from local governments to run a safe childcare center, we don't have it. And I don't think we're going to see it.
Yeah, one of the things, so before I moved and before COVID, my youngest, went to the center that Anne is the director of. And, and the center actually closed when the schools closed in March. And lucky for me, I had to then start working from home anyway because I was teaching. And so I could do that with my kids. I say that's lucky for me, but trying to actually, that's the other thing I think, even in I feel like I'm in a pretty equal, balanced relationship with my spouse, but just kind of like general, I think, still kind of this default gender roles or whatever, or just the nature of like, especially now, like even then, like he had to drive 2 hours for work. Now he only has to go half a mile, but he's still out of the house. Like he's teaching and he's teaching here in Pierre. So I'm in the home. So if twice now we've had to go through quarantine with our 3-year-old. Because I had to make choices about putting her in daycare because I need to be able to work and not have her underfoot. Especially just because my mental health, like I just was going crazy trying to work. And now in a new position where I'm not teaching, but I'm needing to write grants and do all this other stuff for a nonprofit. Like I love being a mom, but I also need my professional persona, my life that doesn't involve my children, and I can't mix them very well. It just doesn't work for me. And so I feel really lucky that I found an in-home provider who's actually a block away from me, and that I felt like she was taking the pandemic seriously because I don't know that any of the centers here in town are actually cutting their numbers anymore. I think they were initially, but I don't know that any of them are continuing to follow CDC guidelines. And there could be some, but I just, I'm not sure that that's happening. And I think a big issue is that money is, there's so many providers across the country that are closing their doors or already did. So we were already in a childcare desert, right? Like I moved it when I knew in March that I was moving here, and people were like, oh, good luck finding childcare, and that was my number one concern moving here was where is my child going to go? Like, where is she going to be? Is she going to have the same quality care she had in Deadwood? Because Northern Hills Children's, Anne and her staff are phenomenal, and it was a fantastic program. And so having that was one of my biggest stressors moving here, and I got really lucky. But now my daughter is also in preschool because she has special needs. And if she doesn't go to preschool, she doesn't get occupational therapy and physical therapy and speech therapy. And so I had to make a choice of I need her to go because she needs that for her developmental needs. I can't provide that for her. And so she's been home twice for potential exposure. And it occurred to me, what do you do if there's this revolving door of kids being potentially exposed and you have to stay home? And thinking about paid, how many people have run out of paid leave already because they've already been on their umpteenth time where they have to be home. And then how do you afford that financially? How do you, even without kids, if you're in healthcare or some other thing where you've been furloughed or, you got an exposure and so you're home again, those kinds of things. And so that's why it just really frustrates me too, in terms of the refusal to increase unemployment, to accept that extra money for unemployment, for Governor Noem to refuse that from the federal government, just any of those other kinds of things that support people so they can float and not end up being evicted or, yeah.
Yeah,
childcare drives the economy in so many ways. And I think, they put $18 million in the CARES Act into childcare in South Dakota, and we saw $30,000 at our center, and we were serving 100 kids before COVID. And again, like the refusal of that money is really a slap in the face to working families. And I mean, we all know that that's very common for us to see, but other people see it as noble to turn away money. But the reality is we all know that our economy can't work without our essential workers, our frontline workers, and people can't gamble if no one's bringing them free drinks. So that's really, we can't close the door on these people.
You got freedom, you got tourism.
I got positive pants.
Yeah, I got Mount Rushmore.
You got positive pants, right on. Seriously, you guys, I've had enough beer. I'm going to say this. I was so in a space of hating Donald Trump. Like I could feel it in my core, like I'm a sexual assault victim. So everything he said and when he talked about women and things like that always brought me back to those bad spaces in my life. But I didn't think I could hate anybody more. And she's winning right now. She's winning the hate war. Like I could not be more mad at another female ever for the way that she's treating children, that she's treating other women, that she's treating our teachers, our healthcare workers, everything. It's this flippant, I am me, I am defiant, I don't care. And it literally makes me physically ill. And I just don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to do with it. My therapist called today because she's moving practices between a big hospital and now she's moving into her own private practice. And she called today and she's like, "You doing okay?" And I was like, "You do not have the time right now. Like this is going to be a 5-minute call, but I swear on my life, if you got 45, I'll give you 45. Like, thank God she's on our side of history. Anyway.
Well, yeah, and Bree, when you mentioned about the federal unemployment that South Dakota could have taken extra money for its people, and it's like it's so rich of the governor to not accept that money when she and her family and her family's farm have accepted so many dollars in federal subsidies. So like federal money is great for her operation and it's great for our farmers and everything, but it's not something that our working people should be accessing. Like just the hypocrisy of that. I had a minor rage stroke here while you were talking. And yeah, it's been a wild ride here in South Dakota. I know we're making the headlines for, having some of the highest per capita rates of infection and death rates. But I think what people, aren't seeing are, the on the ground economic impacts. And I know here in Pierre, when I ran for District 24, one of the questions that always comes up was talking about workforce development. And people, talk about how much of a struggle it is for employers to fill jobs in Pierre. And one, it's, in Pierre, we're not on any of the interstates. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Affordable housing is always an issue, but that childcare, that's the thing, because we usually have a bunch of white guys in office and they're not the ones that are having to make the phone calls and make those decisions and figure out where their kids are going to get care. A lot of that labor falls to women and it doesn't get recognized in the Capitol.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like, I think when I suggested we'd talk about impact on women, I'm really feeling that, like in terms of just navigating, just like normal stuff. And, Anne, I'm sure you can kind of speak to this too, having a young child at home. It's like, and even just working in a daycare, like kids are like living petri dishes. I used to joke about this as a teacher too, the first week of school, it was called the back to school special. And I was, I just knew, and after so many years of teaching, it was like, oh, I've got this great immune system now. And I'm not going to say, in high school, it's less issue, right? I can put my Kleenex on the other side of the room and it's like, it's your problem, go deal with it, but don't come near me. So, I have a 3-year-old and, it's like every other day there's a runny nose or a cough or whatever. And it could be a molar coming in. It could be, who knows, right? And so pre-COVID, it was just kind of like, all right, you don't have a fever, but you got a runny nose. Maybe it's allergies or maybe it's this. And you just kind of like, it's like it could be a bazillion different things. And so you just don't even think about it. And, you go about your life. And, you know, so this weekend, sure enough, she's got a runny nose and her cheeks are red, but no fever. And she's coughing. I'm like, well, maybe the house is too dry. So we adjusted the humidity. And then, you know, her cheeks were really red. I'm like, I wonder if she's got a molar coming in, you know? And so I'm like digging in her mouth and she let me feel in her mouth. And then, you know, then Monday morning rolls around and I go to wake up the teenager and I have an even harder time getting her out of bed. And, you know, I usually do the checks like, how you feeling? Are you, you know, and she's like, Mom, my leg hurts and I have a headache. And I was like, crap. And she's like, and my throat hurts, but I was coughing. I was like, no. So, I mean, again, pre-COVID, I just kind of would have been like, hey, you got a cold, whatever. You have asthma. It's probably just a flare up. Like, it's not a big deal. And immediately I was running through my head, like, who have we been in contact with? I got to call the clinic. You know, I was messaging Amanda and a couple other friends like, damn it. Like, you know, and so we immediately got in for a test. Pier, by the way, November 30th, finally has same day testing. So before Pier was, you know, you'd go in for your test and they'd send it by courier somewhere and the courier only comes at 2 p.m. And we have a state lab here. I'm like, I mean, that's the crazy part. I found out from people in Deadwood. They're like, my sample went to Pier. I'm like, what? Well, my sample didn't. So anyway, you know, they had same day testing. So I found out, you know, right away that they did not have COVID, but there was this, you know, that whole day keeping them home and thinking about, you know, just like, oh my gosh, if this, and then my husband, you know, a month ago thought he had it and he had to wait so many days for those test results to come back. And it's like missed days from work and, you know, and all of that. And so, yeah, it's just, it adds so much more stress to the mom game because you're constantly second, like, you know, before you would just be like, oh, there's no fever. Okay, you're fine. And now it's like totally different. And I think about even just like navigating doctor's appointments, like Pearl has to go to Shriners in a week. And they haven't called yet to say if it's canceled. Last spring, we got in right before they started canceling appointments. But, you know, just even thinking about like the travel, like we literally will load our car up with masks, distilled alcohol. Like, you know, one of the local distilleries in South Dakota started making alcohol, not for consumption, but for sterilization kind of things. Let's have a bottle of that. You know, like all these things, just like food. So we can pretty much just like stay in our car unless I have to get gas. And thank God I have a hybrid, so I only have to make one stop. But, you know, it's just like just thinking about like, I have to get to Minneapolis, you know, the whole, all of that. And in the midst of all of this, it just adds so much more stress versus if it was not happening and I could be like, oh, let's stop at this park and play and let's go see friends and try to, you know, we can make a Trader Joe's run for our friends. And the last time I tried to do that, there was like, you know, they were only letting so many people in the building. And I was like, I'm not going to do this with a toddler. Like, it's just not going to happen. So.
And I think, you know, one thing that we have too now is we have really heavy health exclusions. So if your child's exhibiting any of those symptoms, even though, you know, maybe you're confident it's not COVID, we're going to turn them away at the door because we have very small classes. They're little pods that don't change. We try not to move teachers. We did have to move teachers before Thanksgiving and we ended up having to shut the whole place down because of a positive case because we'd moved so many staff that we just couldn't, you know, you can't isolate it at that point. But it makes it that much more inconvenient because parents are trying to fib to us. Like we had to get documentation for allergies and a treatment plan so that we knew that we weren't letting kids in who were potentially COVID positive. And then we're really trying to do household-based exclusion. So if anyone in your house is waiting on a COVID test, you can't come to daycare. And that's just another day that you can't go to work. That's another day out of your leave bank. It's, you know, like my husband only gets 2/3 pay if he stays home and he's 80% billable and like he's an engineer, you know, like again, without top-down leadership and any way to standardize the respect for human dignity that we're all working so hard for, we're not going to get through this without major casualties, you know, obviously literal and figurative to women in the workforce. It's just taking us all down because no one will step up and say, your lives matter. And I think that's something we also have to get people to know too, is Kristi Noem is not pro-life. Like she needs to drop that rhetoric because she does not care about the lives of people in South Dakota. And someone's got to make it stop. Kristen, probably you. Like Kristi Noem is not pro-life.
Yeah, that's
No. And that's the biggest thing because it's the overall thing, right? It's not I get the idea. I mean, it is difficult for me. Like, again, I'm not a religious person, but to have conversations with relatives of mine who don't understand my work and don't understand why I do what I do. And they, and the Christian faith does believe that life begins at conception, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That isn't what science says, but that's fine. You have a faith, and I'm not going to tell you. That's the difference between me and the person who was in my position prior to this, is I'm not going to tell you what to believe. You do you. But if you are going to live a life that cares for others, that leans on each other in bad times, that literally loves thy neighbor in all of the ways possible, and wears a mask when you go outside, that's living in a way that coincides really with the work I do. Because if you're, as Christy Noem saying, I don't give a shit about early child education. I don't give a crap about our teachers. I don't care about our economy except for tourism and making her look good. That's not being there. That's not being there for people, especially for the people on the reservations in our state that are suffering so much more than us dumb, crazy white people are. Like, they are so screwed every day in this state because of our consistent shitty leadership. And I just don't know what to say, because you're exactly right. She's not pro-life. If you're looking at the reservations and saying, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and put your positive pants on and figure it out, that's not being a good neighbor. That's not going to the reservation and saying, how can we help you? How can we be better at this? She doesn't give a shit about being better. I could go on. I'm not going to. I'm done.
Yeah, my biggest thing, like when just thinking about like the death rates with COVID, I think, one of the things I posted on Facebook and Twitter was something about, to the effect of, like, if you say you're pro-life and you aren't taking this seriously, you really need to reconsider your moral outrage over the loss of innocent life. And, really, like, and I saw a great tweet from a Native woman. She said, if you're a parent and your message to your kids is that the older population isn't important, like, it's basically essentially saying, like, good luck with that when you're yeah you need care, right? But it's just this whole, and we talked about that in our last Couch Caucus, but just this whole idea of that, like the whole, just the comments about like pre-existing conditions, all of it, it's just kind of this, and I think about that in terms of women, like we talked about in the last episode, just, the percentage of people in any other context outside the United States would just be like, well, that's just your medical history, right? I mean, I have a connective tissue disorder. I have endometriosis. None of those things make me high risk. But, it's like we all have health. None of us have this like perfect mythical textbook, like health kind of thing, right? Like there's always going to be something that's, we're needing medical care for or whatever. And not all people are impacted equally by COVID. And so, like you said, like the impact on our American Indian population, one of the things that came up on Tuesday in the Build Back Better session that the SD Dems did is, that Red Dawn was talking about, she said, I think we're undercounted, right? So the statistics is that they make up 9% of the population, but she said it's probably more like 14, 15% of the population, which also means then that the impact of COVID is way undercounted. And then think about that in terms of all the other health issues, economic kind of stuff, all of that. It's just, it's because, our census data or whatever, all of the things in terms of how we think about how people are represented. Like, and so we had a big conversation about representation and redistricting. There's just kind of the whole climate of all of that just kind of astounds me. And, and it also frustrates me because not all Christian theological perspectives and practices believe that life begins at conception, and not all Christians believe that either. And so to also just kind of like for her camp to just kind of paint one image like, oh, we're all going to follow this lockstep is also just kind of crazy for me and frustrating. But yeah, like, so she tweets the other day, she says, she's making fun of Joe Biden saying, help is on the way. And it's like some comment about government help.
that one.
How much help have you received? And let's talk about how many people are actually suffering in South Dakota right now and need access to food, paid family leave, health care, like health insurance. Let's talk about Medicaid expansion, like all of these things. Like that is the role of government. And my last line was, why are you in public service? Like that was what I ended with. Why are you in public service if you don't care about the well-being of and the quality of life of your constituents? Like you can't pay lip service to this. You actually need to do something about it. And then, that was right on the heels of some stupid tweet about carjackings in Minneapolis and defunding the police. I mean, she's just, I could join you, Kristen.
Yeah. Well, that's what I just don't understand is the concept that she says her people are happy and all these kinds of things. It's just this whole rhetoric of it's this way and it's that way and the power and her trying to get somewhere and it's all this kind of things. Is like, I just don't understand the concept of, I get it that the majority of South Dakota voted for you over Billy Sutton. That's fine. Like we relented and just barely, but we did, right? Like we said, okay. And Billy did too. It was like, you know what? You won fair and square. It is what it is. But how do you not understand the concept that even though you won, you're not representing the 51% of the state that voted for you. You are representing all of us. Even though I didn't vote for you, you're representing me. And I know that you don't think that you are and you don't think that you have to, but I also made a comment in the Brilliant South Dakota Forward page like yesterday or the day before. And I had said, this is what she wants. She wants to do the exact thing that Donald Trump did, because the whole thing is it's attention. Even if it's bad attention, it's attention. And so if she can continue to ruffle a lot of feathers, because she's getting national people clawing after her every day, whether that's CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, sometimes like different groups and local people, like important people coming after her. Even former Governor Rounds making that comment in doing the Capitol Journal like op-ed, like leaders wear masks. She's being trolled by everybody, and she does what she wants anyway because her people, Ian Fury and whatever that guy is that she makes out with at the Buffalo Roundup. What is his name again? Like the Trump guy,
Lewandowski or whatever.
Lewandowski, there's the name.
I don't know if I said that right.
No, I heard she was making out with him at Roundup. But anyway, in front of people. I think my frustrated thing is about this is because we're doing exactly what she wants, and it's just a mirror image of that orange clown that we're almost rid of. This is exactly the cycle. She wants this. She's feeding on this. Well, she's not feeding on it because she needs to eat a sandwich, for cripe's sake. But she's just in this space of like, I don't care because I'm going to be in power. I don't care. I'm going to run for president. The little does she know that a person from South Dakota is very unlikely to win a presidency, no matter what she does. And she's not going to be vice president either. So she needs to get real, get a new plan. I don't care. Go be a lobbyist. Go get the hell out of here. I don't care what you do, but just go away and let someone, even Dennis Dugard, who I didn't always agree with, but let someone who actually cares about the majority of people in the state, let them lead instead of you. You're just the worst. Period. Mic drop.
Yeah, and as we're coming up on an hour here, we should probably wrap up our discussion for this week. But as far as the issues that COVID is obviously exacerbating, both Anne and Kristen, what's one thing to look out for this legislative session that you want us to, pay attention to and be contacting our representatives about?
Funding for early learning. We don't even have a great sense of how many kids are in care in South Dakota because people piecemeal care together. Like we need to get a solid census on kids who are 0 to 6 years old and make sure that they're ready for kindergarten. And that's up to real standards, not up to, these made up ideas that, as long as kids can talk and walk, they can go to kindergarten. No, kindergarten shouldn't be the escape for parents. Like, these kids need to be prepared and ready to learn. So let's get some real money and attention on our 0 to 6-year-olds and make sure that we're raising intelligent people who can put this state back on track.
Mine is, if it's never going to happen because we have the super minority, but if you want abortions to be lesser in the state, totally fine. If you want that to happen, then put sex education in the schools and let it, experienced sex educators, to include Planned Parenthood, but whoever is, ready to start that process, maybe a separate nonprofit, maybe a new group that wants to come in. I'm happy to work with a coalition partner and do a full force thing on this. If you want abortion to be less and you believe, again, like we said, that life begins at conception, then damn it, then let's teach our kids about it, because sex does create children, and sometimes those children are not wanted, and that means, or that that fetus is not wanted, and that means that an abortion will likely happen, and hopefully it happens safely, and hopefully it happens in a clinic and a facility with a doctor who's able to care for that person instead of just in their home and their own way of figuring it out, the old ways of before Roe versus Wade, where there was bleach and hangers and all these kind of things. If that is the decision of a woman in her life, then she should be able to do that procedure safely, just like any other medical procedure. So if you want to stop this, you need to stop the rhetoric, stop the bullshit, stop calling it murder, because none of that is true. The other thing I heard the other day, and I heard it on TikTok, is if you are talking about murder, like, let's say that's, if you really think that that's what it is, we all know, even the four of us, if there was a murder happening very close proximity to us, we would rush in, we would break windows, we would knock walls down, we would do whatever we could. They know it's not murder. They know it's not. It's just part of their rhetoric to get their stupid crap passed. Because if Roe v. Wade were to be knocked down at this point, and thank God with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris around, it probably won't be knocked down. But if it were, they would do nothing about it, and it wouldn't change, and women would die. And so would those fetuses as well. So it's just fund education, period. Not even sex education, fund education. Get people educated and get them in those classrooms and let them learn all the stuff. Don't learn a revisionist version of history. Learn about the atrocities that happened to the Native American people in this state. Learn about the actual truth about Mount Rushmore and the men that are up on those faces that were slave owners and that whipped and beat up African American people in their history. Let's talk about the real shit and stop ignoring it and pretending like it didn't happen, because that's not what is education at all.
Yeah, I saw some recently, somebody posted about oh my God, my brain just went away. The Warnock running for Senate in Georgia, and he's a minister. And so he preached about reproductive justice. And so some conservatives are just kind of going after him about that. And, just the whole idea of like, okay, well, first of all, reproductive justice is really about the fact that African American Black women disproportionately have, higher rates of mortality in pregnancy, they have in birth, in terms of just like all general health outcomes in terms of women's health. Black women, are impacted greater than white women. COVID also impacted greater than white women. And then tying into that to like the childcare, the health, like employment, all of those pieces. But then also just recognizing just that historic trauma in terms of like body autonomy and consent and rape and assault, and thinking about that in terms of those dynamics of, white privilege and people of color and all of that. And so that's also this huge piece of this for me, and thinking about, in terms of that education, like over, how many times have there been bills also, in terms of like the anti-trans legislation and everything else, and even just like the medical legislation that came up last year about those youth in particular, that really gets back at that same issue. It's this violation of their their being as a person. And, and really, I mean, I feel like it should just be a philosophy in terms of policy that you just don't interfere in people's medical decisions. Like that should just be the policy, full stop. Like, it's between me and my physician, and that's the end of it. Like it just shouldn't be regulated by, and that's kind of the thing that's driving me crazy is she'll talk about freedom and personal responsibility and, blah, 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 blah. But I can guarantee you come January, whatever, it's going to be all about like, oh, now we need to regulate people for, going to the doctor, and you can't do this and this and this with your body, and no pot.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, we could have a whole other section about that.
That's a whole other week on Amendment A.
We also, Bachman, I wanted to point out that's how you hold a cat, where the cat is looking at the camera and just sitting so nice, like purr. Here I am. That was so cute. Ugh.
So speaking of next issues, we will be, so Kristen and Anne, we might, if you guys want to come back, when the legislative session starts, we do plan to do it weekly, and it'll be kind of based on like, what's the docket looking like, and trying to kind of debrief during the week and what's coming up. So if some bills show up that, and hopefully they will, in terms of like the early education panel, like research, like all of those kinds of things, if those things show up, then we'd love to have you back to just kind of deconstruct what's kind of going on with legislation, and how do people advocate, how can they get involved, those kinds of things. And I think our next one is actually, well, we do have one December 17th, but I think we actually landed on New Year's Eve too, when Amanda and I planned these out. But we're thinking that one's going to be a fun night where we just play Among Us, and we'll try to get it going with Twitch and have a bunch of people. And there might be a surprise cameo in Among Us from COVID Christie.
Ooh. Also, do that during session. I think that's amazing and whatever, but I also feel like I need to pay all three of you, because this feels like a therapy session. Like all of it either feels like I took a huge dump, or like that just just feels better. I don't know. Like I seriously, I'll send you checks in the mail. This is just like, so thank you. This is amazing.
But we could also just plan some off-air sessions where we just, shit talk about
y'all.
Whatever.
That's when the real swears come out.
I highly recommend the New Year's Eve one. I think that's going to be really fun, because if we have a COVID Christie minion in Among Us, you get to you could just be yeeting her out into space every round, whether she's guilty or not. Just like,
oh my gosh, I love it.
How many times can you see that person ejected?
or whoever the imposter is, just watch them kill her in front, and it's fine.
Yeah. Well, we could play the hide and seek version. I learned that tonight, where you actually you don't mute, and you announce who the imposter is. And so you're having this, so you just like focus on your tasks, like get your tasks done before they murder everybody. And so you know who the imposter is, and now you're like running around trying to like get your tasks done, and like looking out for that person over your shoulder, and you dim the lights. So the imposter has dimmed lights so they can't see as well. Anyway, I learned that from my 12-year-old nephew tonight before we did this. I was playing that with family. But so you can pay.
It's exciting.
It's a fun game. Amanda introduced me to that game.
Yeah, it's good. So yeah, everybody preparations. You get your Among Us downloaded, play around with it. We'll do some practice rounds. I have way too much fun with that game. Like
I think I'm gonna actually pay the fee just so I can see if I can play around with my skin, and see if I can actually get a COVID hat, do my little crochet hat thing, and see if I can get that going.
Nice.
I love it.
But yeah, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to everybody who caught us live and who maybe catches snippets of us on the recording. But we will be back again in, what'd you say, Bree, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think December, every other week until session.
Yep.
So December 17th or whatever that Thursday is.
Yeah, and so if you've got ideas of what you want us to talk about, I know the Medicaid expansion petitions are live now, so that's the thing. Amendment A. So, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, but we will talk about it right here on Couch Caucus. Thanks, everybody.